Hi, I'm Juan Gallardo. I'm a dean of students at Sharpstown High School in Houston, Texas. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about my philosophy and my strategies supporting English learners through the UDL framework. But first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my career as an educator. In 2001, I immigrated to the United States from Spain to teach Spanish at the very same school where I am an administrator at right now, when I'm a dean at right now, Sharpstown High School. I had never been in the United States before 2001, and I was intrigued by the opportunity to come work here. When I arrived though, the culture shock was immense. For some reason, I had wrongfully assumed that life in the United States couldn't be that different from life in Europe, but it was. Adapting to that new environment here was very tough. But one of the things that helped me navigate all the differences, all the things that were completely different from Spain in my case, was the fact that I had a huge number of ELL, of English learners, students in my classes. And somehow I felt like I was part of that diverse incoming world to Houston in my case. And I felt that my journey of discovery of this country and its culture ran parallel to the journey of my ELL students. Now, let me stop my story right there to make an important point connected to that experience I just mentioned, that shock that you feel when you enter a new culture. And I'm not talking as a tourist. I'm talking arriving at a new reality that has become your reality. As teachers, we have all been in that sticky situation. Let's say it is springtime, and you've been working very hard all year to develop your instruction strategies, to manage behavior, to build community with your students, and help all of your students thrive. And then all of a sudden, you get a new student, say, in March, April, or even May. Picture that moment when, in the middle of your lesson, an administrator knocks on your door and introduces you to your new student. And she doesn't speak English. What's your first reaction? What body language are you using when you see that? Again, remember, you're in class, everything is going well, all your kids know you, know your subject, know your ways, and then you get a new student, March, April, May. Your new student may not know English yet, but she can tell how you feel by your tone, by your actions. I'm sure most of you feel at least a little annoyed when something like that happens. Am I right? You're rocking your lesson, your kids are getting it, you see the results of everything that you have been done for almost a whole school year, and then boom, a new student. Whereas feeling annoyed is perfectly understandable, please. Put yourself in the position of the child. She has arrived at a new country with a new culture where everything she knew about life and functioning is completely different. Picture her the night before attending her first day of school in America. How she may have been feeling nervous, excited, terrified. What I'm trying to say is that it is critical that you welcome every student the second they enter your world. Something as simple as a smile can go a long way. Throughout this video, we're going to talk about how we can support English learners through the Universal Design for Learning framework. We will look at levels of support for engagement, representation, and action and expression. As you watch this series, not just this video, remember to try your best to put yourself in your student's shoes. That may not be easy, but that is something that you have to do. Now let's begin with engagement. I cannot express how important it is to build caring relationships with your students, regardless of their backgrounds, their culture, or their first languages. You must dive into your students' funds of knowledge so you can be more culturally responsible. Please create an environment that feels safe and welcoming, and better optimize relevance, value, and authenticity for your learners. In other videos in this series, you'll learn some techniques on how to build strong relationships with students in more depth, so I'm just going to touch on the surface here. Building relationships often starts with sharing something about yourself, your likes and dislikes, your hobbies, or information about your family, if you are comfortable with it. But we cannot stop there. We must also really listen to our students, their stories and experiences. How did our English learners immigrate to the United States? What was that experience like for them? What challenges did they encounter? And what successes did they celebrate? My team in Sharpstown High School recently interviewed newly arrived Latino students, and we heard overwhelming stories of hard troubles and terrifying experiences. Most of us educators haven't gone through half of the hardships many of our newly arrived immigrant children have had to endure. Besides their often dramatic journeys and struggle with acculturation, many of them face tremendous language barriers, economic struggles, and may suffer bullying or witness plain discrimination and prejudice targeted towards their parents or themselves. Think about that and how you can reduce barriers for your students based on the knowledge you gain. But don't stop at listening to just your students. Connect with the families and hear the stories and perspective as well. This can take time, contacting that many people and doing all that legwork, but the payoff is well worth it. Because you will build understanding and strengthen your relationships with your students. When conducting outreach, remember that your outreach must be very flexible and culturally responsive. To minimize cultural barriers, teachers and administrators should be very clear to parents that they are not only welcome, but encouraged to participate in the school's activities, and that doing so represents no disrespect. Bear in mind that in many Latino cultures, parents feel that participating in a school proceeding is an intrusion. They may not be used to this. To get your English learners interested and engaged, remember to optimize choice and autonomy. Let your students explore subjects and content that are important within their cultures and home languages. Being connected with something that feels like home can help the students feel safe. This can be done easily. For example, running a survey that could give you that information. Simply just ask them, okay, what are the things that talk to them? What's your favorite hobby? Favorite sport? How do you see yourself in the future? What's important in your life? You may think of yourself as a teenager first, okay, when you do this kind of thing. What did you like to do as a teacher? What were your interests? That may give you the inspiration you need to ask the right questions to your English learners so you can learn more about them. You can also help build community within your classrooms by connecting your English learners with other students who are both alike and different from them. Build collaborative grouping to enhance community and provide supports for sustaining effort and persistence when things are challenging. Remember to establish clear goals, both for learning and for conduct and behavior, so all students feel welcome, heard, and freed from judgment. Self-regulation is also extremely important for your English learners. Remember, many of these students have come from different cultures and have experienced extreme adversity or trauma. They may be anxious, stressed, and overwhelmed by their new environment at home. Providing them with options and choices to cope, reflect, and self-assess can help their transition to their new life and feel more comfortable in their new community. An important note here, in some more serious cases, for example, counseling may be required. It is important that you don't overstep and try to deal with issues that may require a different kind of professional expertise. English learners and representation. It is clear that the UDL framework has a very special place for EL students because it reminds all educators to provide options for language and symbols. Let me make a very important point here. It's crucial to remember that just because your students don't speak English or are still learning English doesn't mean they have any sensory deficiency. So please do not talk too loudly to your students, the way you may talk to your 90-year-old grandma. Rather, from the moment you welcome students in your classes, support them by exploring the UDI checkpoints on providing options for language and symbols. For example, you may decide to talk more slowly because that may help them understand. You don't need to talk more loudly. Okay, so let's discuss those a little bit. The UDL guidelines remind us to clarify vocabulary and symbols. We must be sure to offer language support which can be addressed with anchor charts around the room, subtitles in videos, glossaries of keywords, rich visuals, and realia. Next, we need to remember to clarify syntax and structure. Contrary to the classical immersion approach that dictated that the original language of the student should be avoided at all costs, in 2015, Cohen conducted new research that indicated that the student's knowledge of grammar and syntax in his mother language is beneficial when acquiring an additional language and should be embraced. The research goes on to say that translanguaging, a form of flexible bilingualism, should be encouraged. In other words, this is a huge contrast with the immersion approach we had before, in which the original, the mother language of the student was always avoided. Now they're proving that that first language can be helpful if you use it to learn the second languages, because a lot of the grammar is similar, a lot of the brain structures associated with learning a language are similar. The UDL guidelines also suggest we promote understanding across languages using the following strategies. This is directly from the UDL guidelines. Make all key information in the dominant language, for example, English, also available in first language, for example, Spanish, for learners with limited English proficiency and in ASL for learners who are deaf. Link key vocabulary words to definitions and pronunciations in both dominant and heritage languages. Define domain-specific vocabulary, for example, MapKey in social studies, using both domain-specific and common terms. Provide electronic translation tools or links to multilingual glossaries on the web. Embed visual, non-linguistic supports for vocabulary clarification, pictures, videos, etc. We are also reminded to illustrate through multiple media. You can provide visuals that are both universally designed and culturally responsive. For example, when working with predominantly Latino and Hispanic students, I will share the word flag next to Latino countries' flags, president next to a president of a Latino country, monument, food, city, all next to images of distinctly Latino items. Videos in English with subtitles in the student's first language will be very beneficial in the initial stages of English learning, but don't take too long before you start showing English spoken videos with English subtitles, as the scaffolds benefit spelling and a deeper immersion in the new language with the images as contextual support. English learners and action and expression. When we're working with English learners, it is important that we offer multiple means of action and expression, both for the students and their families. Oftentimes, when students' parents aren't showing up to school-hosted events, we think of them as uncaring or uninvolved. Remember what I mentioned before about cultural differences. There is often more to the story. For example, they may feel like they are unwelcome if you don't speak English, or won't be able to understand the content of those meetings. Maybe they don't have childcare or work in the evenings, or as I said before, they may feel that participating in school activities is actually interfering with educators. We must always assume the best intentions and hold a positive perspective of students and their families. To reduce barriers to participation, consider providing 1. Childcare support for families with little kids. 2. Offering free transportation. 3. Hosting events in places in the communities where families congregate, like for example, churches or other places. Like basically the idea is if they cannot come to you, you must go to them. When students are learning English, we must give them time to answer a question. Patience is a virtue. Our English learners are doing double work when answering questions, coming up with an answer and also translating it to the words in English. We must give them the time they need to answer because it is critical that they speak to develop their language skills and lose their fear of speaking. Remember to foster a judgment-free zone as students learn a new language and talk in front of their classmates. Laughter or mocking from other students simply cannot be tolerated ever. The UDL guidelines remind us to provide options for expression and communication. If we allow our learners to compose in multiple media such as text, speech, drawing, illustration, comics, storyboards, design, film, music, dance, movement, visual art, sculpture, then they will be able to convey what they have learned, even if they don't have the specific words to say it yet. When we provide options to use multiple tools for construction and composition, we can further promote language skills and understanding. For example, text-to-speech and or voice recognition software can help promote good pronunciation. Spelling and grammar checking tools can assist students struggling with composition. While we provide these options, it's important to remember that our voice commands devices, such as our phones and even remote controls, focus on understandable rather than perfect pronunciation. The main purpose of language is communication, so we shouldn't require our students to have a perfect pronunciation at first, and instead, we should have them focus on them being able to make themselves understood. Later, we can focus on polishing their pronunciation. I no longer have any hopes of losing my foreign accent, but I think I can communicate just fine. To summarize, using the UDL guidelines to help support English learners allows us to be more culturally responsive and reduces barriers to learning. When working with English learners, remember to put yourselves in their shoes. Be warm and friendly. Allow them to use tools to help them build comprehension and show what they know, and work to create a safe, judgment-free community in your class. And please, when they arrive in your class, even if it is late in the school year, remember to smile.